Good morning. How you doing, brother?
Man, I'm fan bloody tastic. That's how I'm doing.
Well, our audience is a little thin so far compared to what we've grown accustomed to, and that's actually I'm glad to see that this morning because we we didn't do a pre-scheduled setup for this episode, and that tells me, at least anecdotally, that there is value in the work that I'm putting in the wee hours before we get started normally. Uh, Yesterday I went fishing. Had a good long day, but it was a long day, especially since I did that live stream with Alex Bleepin Jones last night. Congratulations again on 1,000 subs there, brother. Uh, and so I overslept this morning. I didn't roll out of bed until just before 6:30. So, all right, what are we talking about today, Cameron?
Well, we're just going to roll part of what we were going to talk about yesterday into today because WTF CNN, I mean, you want to talk about pushing a narrative, but I mean, your martyrs are not good people. The things that you riot for, the things that you scream no justice, no peace for, I mean, you're golly, if you guys could just have an actual hero. Hero. I was about to say something about Dindus, and they blurred together in my mouth there. No, but we're going to talk about Dante Wright, and I mean, sorry the kid's dead, but like seriously, people, rule number one: don't fight the cops. Don't fight the cops. Don't fight the cops. Duh.
You know what? Let's run down that rabbit hole for just a minute. Because there is a correct time to fight the cops. There is such a thing as the correct time to fight back against the police. And there is a reasonable perspective where that's a very American thing to do. Assuming that you're talking about a series of unjust laws, where the government generally has dramatically overstepped its purview and the authority that is let to it by the people, there becomes a point at which the police, as the arm of the government which is acting in bad faith and corruptly, are essentially they should be regarded as the same thing as the knee breaker coming at you from the mafia. Now, that said, we're not there yet. Okay? I think we have touched that a little bit in the last year or so. And, you know, we talked about the situation on January 6th, where part of the problem there was that the police did an illegal thing. They opened with an illegal thing, which was attempting to bar the people from entering the people's property without cause before anything set off. As soon as the police had asked people who were practicing their First Amendment rights to leave public property for no other reason than they just didn't want them to be there, that police force lost its legitimacy under the law. And that's not my opinion of how the law should work. That is how the law works. You can't be ejected from public property unless you have committed a crime. Now, that crime can be trespassing, but trespassing requires that you be asked to leave by someone with the authority to do so, and that you then refuse to leave. When you're talking about public property. And when you're talking about private property, if it's not posted, you have to be asked to leave and then refuse before you're trespassing. If it's posted, that's different. If it's posted, the posting is that original ask. That's the, no, you have been informed that you're not welcome here by someone with the authority to do so. But until you have been actively informed by someone with the authority to make the demand that you leave and refused it, that is when you begin trespassing. That's the reason that burglars are not charged with trespassing. They're charged with breaking and entering. It's a different crime. Yeah, there's Dad. He says, when the police violate the law or Constitution in cases where the law violates the Constitution. Yes. So, and I don't mean to go down that rabbit hole far enough to say these are the times that I would resist. But by and large, what we've seen with these poor young dindus who are being hunted for sport, if you believe the headlines.
Yes, it's not what happened here.
None of them are resisting arrest in cases where the police are attempting to enforce an unconstitutional or illegal law. Yeah.
I mean, but that's so much what didn't happen here, just like so much what didn't happen in basically every other situation where these things have gone down. And the news media bears so much responsibility for the division in our country because they help propagate this myth that somehow, it's just in 2021, in the current year, it's dangerous to be black and out in public, especially if you're a male. And this poor kid was driving around in a car that apparently wasn't registered properly and then decided to fight the cops. Again, I go back to like the very first thing I said. Don't fight the cops. This is not hard. It's just not.
And just as a matter of practical advice, at a minimum, if you're gonna do crime, if you're gonna fight the cops, don't turn around and fight when you're out-armed and outnumbered. The phrase "choose your battles" comes to mind.
Yes.
Now, this case, there are some questions that do need to be answered.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the cop, here's your F-bomb. She fucked up. She fucked up on the micro and the macro. Like, she really screwed the pooch.
Well,
Absolutely.
there's a few possibilities there. So the story that we're being told about this officer, and please believe, we're getting these stories because this is a female officer. Even white woman, but a woman nonetheless. If this were a white man that had done this, there would be no cover being offered. She's being offered cover. And let's just assume for a moment that the story that she thought she was holding her taser when she fired her gun is true. If that were the case, truly the case, and it was a white male officer, we wouldn't have heard that until he made the argument as part of his defense in a court case, and even then it probably wouldn't have made the news. But because there's some kind of victim class associated with the officer, they're willing to run cover for her, especially since, and I suspect that she would not have even gotten this consideration if it weren't for her union involvement, because this woman is apparently a 26-year veteran of the Brooklyn Center Police Department and was previously the president of their police union. That means that she has been personally responsible to giving a lot of money to the enemy.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how qualified she really is. Because, look, I've never even touched a taser. But I just can't imagine that I would confuse the two things. Heat of the moment, whatever. Yeah, sure. But still, like, how could you how could you not know the difference? It just like she obviously has had training on it. Um,
No, she obviously should have had training on it.
okay, okay, she's obviously had extremely poor training on it.
But the question that needs to be asked now, I mean, 26-year veteran, previously the president of the police union, how much policing has she done in that 26 years? Is she a police officer in the same way that Fauci, who hasn't seen a patient in living memory, is a doctor?
That's a good question. I well played, sir.
I mean, is this the first time she's been back out on the beat after leaving the union position? I don't know. I don't know that it is or isn't, but I mean, it's an easy question. It's an obvious question to ask. It's an obvious question to ask, given that she was in that officer position for the union. You know, how much of her time was spent on the union? Is this her first time back on the beat since she left the union?
Yeah, and even accounting for all that heat of the moment stuff, like you're afraid or you're upset or fog of war, pick your phrase. A 26-year veteran that makes that kind of mistake because they're upset, like what's going on in their mind? Because I watched Tatum's breakdown of it and watched the video myself a few times, and our buddies at Polytech covered this a couple of days ago. There's a few things to notice, like that the other two officers didn't draw their weapons because they did not feel that threatened in this situation. But for some reason she did, and she was the only one who did. And, it just makes you wonder certain things about her temperament in general, as in going back to your Dr. Fauci question. But just the same, and I'll say it unequivocally, it's sad that Dante Wright was killed, but the manner in which he was killed was, it was consistent. Like, what? He's driving around in a car with busted registration. He's got warrants out for his arrest, and then decides he's going to fight the cops. I actually had a really similar thought to what Brandon Tatum said in his video. So, look, this ain't Grand Theft Auto, okay? They're not going to stop chasing you just because you get outside of their radar range. And besides, once they know you've got active warrants and you run from the cops, they're going to start showing up like at your mom's house and your best friend's house, and all that. They will find you, okay? There's no such thing as a safe house like that in the real world.
Yeah, and remember when you say, because we pointed out, the Dindus, all your martyrs are monsters. Among the multiple warrants that were out for Dante at the time was he had an open warrant for his arrest related to an aggravated armed robbery attempt. So this guy's 20 years old, and this goes back to something that we've talked about before with the young men speakers event that we covered a few years ago, where all of the stand-up guys that were supposed to be talking to a group of young black men who were there because they were judged to be at-risk youth. Yeah. Every one of the speakers that got up there and spoke, they spoke about recreational felonies, stealing cars, dealing drugs, mugging people, and even occasionally murder as just being, the things that boys do when they're teenagers. Apparently that's the case for that community as far as they understand it. And that just blew my mind to hear them talk about that way.
Yeah, if you're 20 years old and you've already got an aggravated robbery, an armed, whatever, the thing where you
didn't have much of a life to live anyway.
Well, not only that, but like,
I'm terrible.
Look, I'll just say it, like, he got what was coming to him. He just got it a lot earlier in life than a lot of these people get it. Honestly, normally they dodge the bullet a few more times before it finally catches up to him. His dumb ass just happened to run into one of the most incompetent police officers in the state of Minnesota, and it cost him big time.
All right, real quick, Lindsay just said, good morning, other Steve, because now Uncle Steve and Steve Rodemeyer are watching. Lindsay, that's not fair. Uncle Steve is significant. He came before Rodemeyer. Call him older Steve.
Oh, yeah. Making fun of people for things they can't help. We're just classy.
Yeah. We just watched that episode of Doctor Who the other day where there's two guys named Dave. One of them is called Other Dave, and one of them is called Proper Dave. Yeah.
But no, like, he's already gone way, way, way bad if at 20 years old. Like, I just can't conceive. And look, Chris, you and I were friends in high school. We even got into some trouble in high school. But we didn't get into, like, aggravated felony levels of trouble.
No, hell no.
It would have been unthinkable. Okay, were we trying to figure out ways to scam bottles of whiskey from the liquor store?
Nope.
Yes. I mean, we kind of were.
I didn't have to figure out ways to scam bottles of liquor from the. I looked old enough to buy stuff. I never had a problem.
That's still technically illegal and a scam. You are presenting yourself as a thing you are not, sir. But I mean, that's what I mean. Like, we had like jobs, you know. You worked at Mellow Mushroom and I worked at McDonald's. Like, we had places to be and things to do, and like, you know, apparently there was no insurance on the car. That was part of the problem, and the registration was off. My car always had registration and insurance on it because I paid for it with my job money, you know? Like, it was, I can't picture, you know, going this far off track this early in life. And to lay it at the feet of all of the usual suspects, the patriarchy, it's the fact that our justice system is set up to persecute minorities, and just all of that other bullshit that the corporate media likes to perpetuate because, well, if it bleeds, it leads. Not only does it further the racial divisions in our country, it doesn't address the real problem. I think you touched on it earlier. There's something happening in that community where you can't have an honest conversation. Like, you know, keep your hands where the cop can see them. Maybe don't pop off at the mouth. And if it comes down to it and you're going to get arrested, don't fight. I mean, it's the same thing with George Floyd. George Floyd kicked his way out of the car. He might have survived that encounter if he hadn't gotten himself all worked up. I don't know. My opinion is he was dead as soon as he swallowed all those speedballs. But he might have survived the encounter, but instead he decided to fight the police, and he ended up, you know, dying on the ground. And it's the same thing here. It's
and I'm glad you brought up Floyd. Let's tie this back around. We got about 12 minutes till the top of the hour, and I don't want to drag it out this morning. So one of the things that we've been talking about relative to the Chauvin Floyd situation, Chauvin trial, it doesn't matter. Obviously, Chauvin should be acquitted. I think anybody that hasn't come to that conclusion, if you have come to the conclusion that Chauvin actually did nothing wrong since the trial began, you're late to the party and haven't been paying attention. That said, it doesn't matter tactically, practically, if Chauvin is convicted or not. The riots are going to happen. There are going to be riots whether he's convicted or not. And part of the story there is the riots are going to, if he is convicted, then they're going to riot because he wasn't convicted enough, because murder one hasn't been on the table. I think it was briefly, but it hasn't been in any practical way, at least since before the trial started. So if Chauvin gets convicted, he's going to go down for either murder 2, murder 3, or manslaughter. And without getting into all that argument about the legality of it. If Chauvin is convicted, they will riot because he wasn't convicted enough. And if Chauvin is not convicted, they will riot because he wasn't convicted.
Oh, and
know
CNN's going
to... Hang on. Now we know, because Dante Wright went down, and within hours, they were rioting right there. Well, part of that story that's just not getting the reportage that it should be, there was already a BLM protest going on, unrelated, and so it was very easy to just flip the switch and say, okay, it's a riot now because we've got another Dindu. So, flip your picket signs around and pull out the Old English.
Yeah, and I was going to say that CNN's going to continue to have just these baffling headlines like rioters and police clash for third night in a row. No, I'm sorry. They don't use the word rioter. They use the word protester. Protester and police clash for the third night in a row. Protesters don't normally clash with police.
Correct.
Peaceful protests, even if the cops come in and they're dicks, right, and they're wrong, and they throw you out of the park or whatever, or arrest the leaders and whatnot. Peaceful protests are inherently peaceful. I mean, look at the stuff with MLK. He deliberately provoked responses out of law enforcement officers that he knew were going to be entirely unbalanced and unjust, but they remained peaceful throughout the entire process. As soon as you're clashing with police, you're not a peaceful protester anymore. You're a rioter, and the fact that CNN won't call them rioters is another piece of this problem. It's shame on them, really.
Yeah.
But
go ahead.
Go ahead. No,
Nope.
I was going to say, hey, look, we didn't want to run this one into the ground. If you want to go ahead and call it a little early, I get it. Just
Yeah, and
hey, stop making us right, people. Stop it.
Right, and part of this is I'm tired of the Dindu headlines, right? Statistically, so few incidents like this occur that the only way as many of them make the news as possible as do is that there are activist journalists who are going out of their way specifically to find them. So please believe, given that, if there were actually people who were being hunted down and murdered for no reason, without contributing at all, those would be the stories they would be telling. But there are none.
Yeah, I mean, look, just to kind of run down some of the greatest hits. But hey, look, Philando Castile had marijuana in the car along with the 3-year-old kid. Breonna Taylor was knee deep in the dope game and was implicated in the murder and the cover-up of a murder. It's no accident that she ended up on those warrants. George Floyd was in the middle of a drug deal. And now, here we are. Dante Wright had active warrants out for his arrest and then decided to fight the cops. The occasions where something like where Tamir Rice happens is so incredibly rare. And even in that incident, that was a mistake. The officer saw somebody holding what appeared to be a gun, and so he shot him. Okay? But the whole thing about how they're just targeting the darkies because they want to kill them, like, God, that's such a bullshit narrative. And I understand why you're tired of talking about it, because it's offensive to my intelligence. Oh, he didn't do nothing. Oh, yeah, sure. I bet.
Yeah, he was pulled over for having air freshener.
Yeah, he was pulled over for having air freshener. Okay. As soon as I see or hear something like that, I immediately know, okay, that's the one thing in this that's not true.
Yeah, and that's always the headline. killed for having air freshener, killed for trying to pass a counterfeit $20 bill, killed for jogging while black. No, you're a liar. That sentence is so far from the truth that you cannot have crafted it non-deliberately. You didn't accidentally get that wrong.
The whole modern incarnation of this narrative started out as a lie with Mike Brown and hands up, don't shoot.
Yep.
You know, how many people
Mike Brown was the template when they learned that, you know, if you tell a lie, if you tell the Dindu lie, then the tourist protesters will go to a place and burn it down. The enemy learned that they can weaponize the public.
Yeah, and just all the people don't know that they've all heard the hands up, don't shoot, and that his friend who was there, that's what he testified to the police. And that is correct. That is the statement he gave to the police. But then when the FBI got involved and explained, all right, kid, listen, if you lie to us, that's a crime. So were the hands really up? Did he really beg him not to shoot? And then, funny enough, the story changed just like that.
Yeah, and but I want to get off of that for just a second and get back to this idea of weaponizing the public, because something that I want everybody to understand: the ability of the left to weaponize the public is rooted in the same place that all of the evil of the left is rooted. At the very core, the base first principle belief of the left is that taking from someone against their will is morally preferable, is morally better than earning. All these riots, they happen not because the left can tell a lie and spin a narrative and whip a bunch of people up into a froth so that they'll go and do a lot of damage. No. These riots happen because the left knows that if they use their media propaganda arm to tell a sufficient lie, that lie does not froth the people up into wanting to commit a riot. What that lie does is it signals the tourist protesters all over the world. You know, they're mostly all over America, but they are coming from all over the world. It signals the tourist protesters that if you go to, in this case, Minneapolis, there will be a riot of such size that you can do significant economic damage by looting and burning the place down. They know that if they plant a flag in a space and say this will be the space, that the riot will be something that the police cannot deal with, will be overwhelmed by, and they can use that opportunity for these Marxists to go and steal their big flat screen TVs. Make no mistake, we know that BLM is a Marxist organization. The same thing is true of the Democrats, the entire Democrat Party. It is a Marxist organization. These attacks are orchestrated to cause harm to people. The first question a Democrat asks before they vote on something is, does this hurt somebody I don't like? Not, does this do something good? It's not even the selfish motivation of, do I benefit from this? Before that comes the question, does this hurt somebody for me?
Yeah, is the rich going to pay their fair share? Yeah, but nah, fam, you racist as hell. Burning down a Dollar Tree and stealing some shoes is all about justice.
Yeah. I need a 100-inch TV to match my plastic furniture set. Yeah, I bet you do, honey.
God, I've been inside some of those apartments. Like,
yeah,
fucking folding chairs and a PS4 and an 80-inch TV. But yeah, man. But anyhow.
Yep.
But that's
that's our tip for the day. If you can afford to spend $500 on a PS4, buy a sofa. Y'all be safe out there. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.